first of all, there's loads to cover when it comes to exercise and timing and associations. There's so much to go through, but I just wanted to highlight the main points I think are going to be the most helpful and the most relevant to the most amount of people as well. So there is certainly points that I've got for dogs who maybe have struggles when it comes to exercise for whatever reason. So for like being outside, perhaps there could be medical issues that are preventing it, or behavioural issues. So I have got bits in here for people who own dogs who have those kind of struggles too, because there's nothing more infuriating than being given advice that you cannot follow or you can't do and it doesn't apply to you. So I've tried to kind of include everyone in it. So there are definitely some dogs who can't do certain exercises, or they can't exercise for long. Or perhaps it has to be very structured in the way that they do things because of joint trouble maybe. So have things like hip dysplasia, elbow dysplasia, spondylosis, breathing difficulties, heart-related problems, phobias of being outside as well. So that's like a mental restriction that can affect a lot of dogs too. So if your dog is sort of like recovering from something, then you may have to be following a particular plan. Maybe they've had an operation, or you're aware of a underlying condition that you're trying to prevent. This could be breed specific, or it could just be your dog specific. So if you do too much of the wrong exercise, or if you just suddenly were to increase what you're doing or change what you're doing, that could have a lot of impact on your dog. So there's a lot of behaviours that are actually symptom behaviours of pain, of discomfort, and where the dog shows these behaviours, which to us seem like problem behaviours, you know, and they can be, trust me, to live with. But if you suspect there could be pain anywhere, you absolutely need to get that ruled out before you look at how exercise could be impacting your dog's behaviour or their training. Because if there is something, if you think there could be something there quite likely is. So, I mean, I've had dogs with many issues with all the dogs I've had. But as I say, problems such as like hip dysplasia, elbow dysplasia, the spondylosis, which is fusing of the notches in the spine. There's like resource guarding is a symptom behaviour usually. So there are quite a few contributors to it, but pain can be a huge contributor to resource guarding, anxiety, noise phobias, aggression, separation anxiety. So if your dog is showing any of those behaviours, you need to go and get pain ruled out first. If you're not sure where the pain could be, perhaps pain relief trials could be beneficial to you. So some training struggles are actually due to pain and discomfort in the body as well. So dogs who pull on the lead, sometimes they pull because they're actually trying to get either to where they'd be let off lead or to get home again, because the pulling actually hurts them and the walking actually hurts, and the way to stop it is to either get to where they get off lead, so there's no longer the pain there, or getting home again, because then there's no pain. So sometimes lead pulling can actually be an indicator that there is a discomfort in the body. Dogs who struggle to sit or lay down, or to stay or settle. If you're trying to teach these things and your dog just keeps fidgeting, keeps getting up, keeps changing their movements, and seem really unwilling to kind of stay in one particular position that maybe you're trying to teach, it's likely it's because it's actually uncomfortable for them and it hurts somewhere. So again, if you're looking at things like this, just have a look and think, could there be pain here? Could there be something going on that I need to address and I need to make sure I look at before I try and change anything else? So the other thing I wanted to mention is about teeth. So teeth is a huge one, particularly in your poodles, cockapoos, labradoodles, so anything with poodle in it. Because of the poodle, they've got hideous teeth, bless them. They really struggle. But teeth pain, but whether it's the mouth is overcrowded with teeth, or whether it is there is actually just bad teeth because of genetics are hideous in teeth for that particular breed. Anyone who's ever had tooth pain, ever had like an abscess in teeth or needing to have teeth out, you know how every single thing impacts your teeth, the way you feel, and it hurts. So if there's pain and you don't really think it's structural, you think your dog is okay, you know, exercise wise and physically wise, but there's definitely a problem with them behavioural wise, get their teeth checked out. So that's definitely worth looking at. So I just wanted to put that in there before we go any further to do with exercise or training or behaviour work. So I will get on to how we can help dogs who do have struggles, but we'll build that up and we'll get into that. But in general, I want to talk about dogs in general first of all. So if you have a dog who is an adult dog, so we'll say for over a year old, just for argument's sake at the moment, I'll get onto puppies as well in a minute. So if your adult dog is fit and healthy, okay, so there's nothing you believe there to be structurally wrong with your dog or wrong with them in any medical way, then dogs in general who are adults need to have a minimum of about 2 hours exercise a day, or longer if possible, off lead where possible. So dogs cover up to 3 times the distance that we do when they're off lead. So this has been tested quite a lot. And obviously if you have working breeds and like your fast ones, you ever seen a working spaniel when they're out, or working collies, generally they're really, really rapid and they move very, very quickly. So they actually need to have a lot more. So because of the amount of distance they can cover and the amount of exercise that they do need in a day, it's actually really, really common for dogs not to get that requirement met for them. The reality is, due to most people's jobs, the way that we live our lives, and daily structure, is that dogs don't actually get what they need exercise-wise, requirement-wise, which can lead to behaviour problems, frustration issues, and you get knock-on effect struggles, which actually lead on to things becoming really unenjoyable. So life becomes really unenjoyable for you, for the dog, and ultimately then more for you, because if your dog is unhappy in any way, or they're not getting requirements met, you usually know about it in one way or another, because it becomes harder for you, either in the house or on walks. So I'm certainly not suggesting that any of it is easy to be able to meet 2 hours minimum exercise a day for a dog and to be able to have them off lead and stuff, because to be honest, 90% of the owners within this group have a dog who can't be off lead, for whether they are reactive, whether they're phobic of something, or whether their recalls are pretty shocking and can't be trusted. So there are limitations as well, which mean that then puts more of a pressure on the owner, so to have to actually make other changes so that it can happen. So I've written down some things that can be very, very beneficial, because if the requirement isn't being met, the exercise for that young dog, then you're going to have a struggle. So you're going to run into problems elsewhere, which will ultimately not be that enjoyable for you. So I tend to, with all the dogs I've had when they were younger, now bear in mind, up until recently, I've only had elderly boy Bosun, who was 15. So the exercise I did with him didn't really count as such, because he was old and kind of did what he wanted to do. It was more about socialising and just enjoying his time outside. But certainly I have had younger dogs before. My boxers, my springers, my labs, my Rotties and Shepherds, Jack Russells, they're all incredibly energetic, and they need a lot. So certainly I've written down some things that could be helpful and beneficial for young dogs. So if my dogs are over the age of 1 and under the age of 9, I aim for 2 hours exercise with each of them a day. Whether that was them together or apart doing different things, but they need to have that. Otherwise, things are highlighted in the house, definitely. So certainly if you've got multi-dog household issues, which is one of the things that I specialise in, that can be dramatically increased if the dogs are energetic. So if they've got their energy in the house, then they're not going to be that relaxed, and therefore there's more likely to be conflict. So resource guarding as well can be one, because the brain's active, the body's active, it's going, oh, what can I do? What can I look for? If the dog is tired and the dog is asleep, they're not doing half the problem behaviours that you're trying to avoid or trying to work with. And training issues become a lot easier if the dog is more relaxed in the body and is less loopy and kind of wired and switched on. So yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. This is kind of it's a big thing that quite often dogs aren't getting, and it does contribute to other things. So have a look at how far you go in a day with your dog, and how far they go as well. So remember I said they need to cover like 3 times what you do if they're on lead, because I know there's a lot of dogs in here who can't actually be off the lead, they have to go long line instead, which is good. So that was one of my first tips. If your dog has to be on lead, fine, can you use a long line somewhere? So can you go to somewhere that is away from traffic and go on a long line instead? Can that long line length be increased safely? So if you currently use a 15 foot, is it possible to use a 20 foot or a 30 foot with the issues you're working on? Or is that likely to be unmanageable at this point, or just way too much stuff to carry kind of safely? So you need to have a look at that. Walk for longer, walk faster. Walking faster is a great one if you're able to do it. Some people obviously are not able to walk any faster than they do. I currently have a waddle pace, so walking faster would just not work. Walking different terrains is really, really good. Again, for working different muscles, often different smells as well in different terrains. So rather than sticking out on the flat, going where there's maybe, I often say about woods and woodlands a lot, that's helpful if you've got a woods near you. But like different terrains, so maybe mud, maybe there's hills, maybe there's sand that you can go to, paths as well as grassy areas and bush lines. So yeah, just trying to mix up the terrain of where you're going. Include the environment in what you're doing. So any opportunity whatsoever, fallen down trees, cut tree stumps, people leaving rubbish behind, like big things, where people dump stuff randomly. All opportunities for, as long as it's safe to do so, getting your dog jumping over them, going under them, going round them. I often like to use trees for go round, so wrap around, which is where you send the dog from you to go round a tree and then back to you again. And then you can send them to another one. So it's part of agility, and possibly another dog sport. But doing things like that, using things in the environment to your advantage, so your dog is using their brain, using their body, and doing something that is more entertaining than just scanning the area perhaps, or just walking. You're actually using their brain in a different way, and their body. So setting a steps target can help. I know there are some people in this group who have the dog like GPS collars, and they actually do like a step tracker on them, which is pretty cool. I've never had one, but I have got a tracker on my phone, so I can track my steps. So working on the like having a step target for what you want to achieve in a day can help to make sure you're reaching targets for your dog as well. Oh, Rolly has an hour a day off lead where possible, or on lead sniffing. Don't think he'd ever manage 2 hours. Yeah, this is it. It does depend on the dog. Some of them are lazier than others. Some don't need it, and some do need it. But yeah, certainly each dog is different. Right, so steps target. Including swimming or bike riding. Now, this is very dog specific again. So when I had at one point I had 3 boxers, my Springer and my Lab. Now my Lab, I would never do bike riding with him because he was far too lazy and he wouldn't have been able to keep up. But I used to take the other 4, they used to go for bike rides quite a lot. So I would have the 3 boxers off lead and my Springy on lead. With bike riding, and like with any kind of running, as we'll get onto, you need to make sure there's a warm up first. So you absolutely don't want to be doing it on cold muscles because you could get injuries, muscle and ligament tears. It's not good for them. So, and also they need to go to the toilet first. They need to wee, they need to poo, they need to sniff. So like the first 10-15 minutes of just walking on leads and then doing the off lead bike riding part. So I used to go around Waterhall Park or Manfields, if any of you know that. That's in Milton Keynes, not in Essex. And I used to go around there at crazy o'clock. I used to get like 5 o'clock in the morning because that's when I used to be up. And yeah, going for a bike ride with them meant that they could run, they could stretch their legs. They would do that twice a week maybe. And like I said, the one who was on lead, I used to make sure they'd always been to the toilet first and had a bit of a sniffing time first. The lead I used to use was 2.5 meters. It was my longer purple one. And I used to use that was so that he could kind of move freely whilst jogging alongside. Now, I'm not a fast bike rider at all, but I can certainly keep up better with them when I bike than if I were to jog. Some people love to jog or love to run. That's great. Some dogs really, really appreciate that and they love that. I can't. So I've never been able to. I don't know why, I just can't. So that's never appealed to me, but bike riding did. So bike riding was great. The Labrador and the Springer used to like doing swimming. So again, warming their joints up first, making sure they've had decent amount of walking first on lead so that they're not got cold muscles before they're going swimming. And I'd either do it in rivers, or there's certain lakes and like massive ponds that I would use. And they would do like retrieving in the water, which is a nice thing for dogs to do if they like it. You get some dogs who would not catch them in the water at all. They would look at you like you were mad if you tried to take them to go for a swim. So it's very specific about what your dog likes and what they would find enjoyable, where they find the value. So if swimming is something that your dog does like to do, but maybe you can't trust them off lead, you can do it on long lines, so like biothane long lines. Or you can do it, you can actually hire places where you can take them swimming, where you can either get in with them. I've never done it, but I know there are a lot of places where you can do that. So if anyone wants me to share those details of those places, I'm more than happy to. But yeah, like swimming and bike riding makes a difference. It's like a difference to walking. So it's not the same as walking, obviously. There's a bit of difference there for the dog. It's different movements, it's different speeds, and it's stimulating in a different way. I don't suggest doing it every day, like bike riding every day. I think that would be quite stressful for a dog to do it every single day. But a couple of times a week is definitely helpful. So, tug and release games. Playing tug with a dog is great for their muscles. So they use every muscle in their body when they're playing tug, and it's great for building in self-control, particularly the release part of it. So tugging, release, getting them to tug, like you can get recalls that way, and you can get them to come in and like tug it from you in different areas of your body. You can play it low, you can play it high. Lots and lots of different things you can do with tug and release. So having that built in for them, you can use that as part of your walks as well, and as part of your muscle exercises that you do every day with the dog. Football in the garden is great. So I quite like playing football with dogs. So some dogs absolutely love football. Some of them just love to kill the football and hold a football. If you have a dog who likes to kill the footballs, then you can have a couple of footballs, let them kill one, and carry that whilst you kick around the one that's not. So then they might just chase it with the dead one in their mouth. Because it's a fun game that you can play together. You can do it out and about as well, of course, but I don't tend to do football out on a walk, because I don't ever want my dogs to go, oh, football, let me go and get that. So I've only ever kept that to the garden and never really done football on walks. Maybe using Find It. You can do Find It in the house, in the garden, as a way of using muscles, the body, the brain. So you may, if you're a raw feeder, or you've got wet food for your dog or soaked dry food, you can put it into a Kong, hide it somewhere in the garden, and then send your dog to go find it. So they've got to like kind of rush about finding it and using their brain to go and get that. You could do Find It with a ball, you could do it with an item for retrieve. So I used to do a lot with my Springy and my Lab, was letting them sniff an item. So it might be a glove, a hat, a shoe, and I'd go get them to wait, go hide it in the garden, come back in and send them to go and find it. So then they've got to go around sniffing and try and find it. When they bring it to me, they get a treat, and then I'll go and hide another thing, and then they've got to find that. So it's a way of stimulating them and doing things that come naturally to them that they will enjoy, that helps to increase the amount of steps that they're getting in, the amount of exercise they're doing, and the amount of stimulation. So these are helpful for if you're not, if your dog can't necessarily be off lead outside on a walk for whatever reason, or if you're not able to get in a certain amount of distance covered, exercise might be a struggle for you. That's fine. It's a struggle for a lot of people. But the dogs still need it. So the dogs still have a huge requirement every day. So the other thing that can help as well is, due to our lifestyles that we lead and our jobs, quite often it's not doable to be able to do like 2 hours or 2 hours plus, if you've got like the working dogs, of off lead walking a day with your dog, because you just haven't got that time. Certainly in the winter time, can be incredibly difficult to get that in. So you can structure your week so that you do shorter walks in the daytime, midweek, and then weekends you actually use that time for going to different places. So perhaps you go in a car, you go to somewhere different, and you do a 2 or 3 hour exploring walk where you go to somewhere completely different, where you've not been in a while, perhaps the dog's not been there before, and you go and mix with other smells, different things for them to check out, if suitable, other dogs. But of course that might not be within this group. I appreciate it's probably not a doable thing to just go waltzing up to people who've got unknown dogs. But it's certainly, yeah, it can be helpful. Some people employ a dog walker. Now that is dependent on financial status, if you've got the funds to be able to afford a dog walker on a regular basis, and depending on your dog's struggles. So some dogs don't do well with strangers, so therefore a dog walker may be a bit difficult to introduce. Or some dog, if there's issues going on in multi-dog households, sometimes a dog walker can actually cause more harm than good due to excitement levels. But it's well worth thinking about, if you can't do the exercise, is there someone who can? Is there someone who you trust, friend, family, neighbour, someone who's good with the dog, who possibly can do things to help sometimes take the pressure off of you, just to make sure the dog is getting what they need. So there's also fully enclosed dog fields which you can hire, which again, it depends completely on availability at the time when you're available to go. Depends on whether or not your dog can get in a car, and it depends on finances again, because it's a regular thing. If you're doing it regularly, the cost adds up. So I mean, I love enclosed fields for so many reasons. They're so helpful. And generally the standard is about £12 for 50 minutes-ish, and you usually get full access to about 2.5 acres. So that's standard for most places you go. Occasionally you can get a 5-acre field for that. My advice when you're in a field, don't stand still. So move, keep walking. Lap the field continuously whilst you're in an enclosed field, because that way your dog's getting the most out of being in there, being free. If you kind of just stand there or sit there, the dog's not really going to be using it to the advantage, or if you stand still when they do, they're not really using it. So lap the field round and round. If you've managed to get a field where there's like items in there that you can use, then you can certainly use them with either toys or with food, of getting the dog jumping them, walking them, going under things, going over things. So there's a lot you can do with enclosed spaces, even if you're only able to hire them occasionally. So beneficial. So, right, okay, I've got, right, with toy play, I wanted to talk about toy play before I talk about restrictions that some dogs have and some dogs can't do. Bear with me 1 minute. If you have any questions throughout, feel free, to pop them in the comment box and I'll do my best to answer. So toy play, I'm a really big fan of using toys for reinforcement, like incredibly big fan of it. Certainly if the dog has value in something, like, it might be a tuggy, a frisbee, a ball, anything that you have that they find value in, I am a huge fan of using it to my advantage. What you need to know about playing with toys, and this is any kind of toys that you're out, if you're out and about and you're playing with them, is that you need to warm the dog up first. So do not just get out the car or walk 10 foot across the road and then start playing with it, because it's really running a huge risk of impacting your dog's ligaments and their joints, their muscles, and it's just, they need to get out like the toileting bit first. They need to have a little bit of a sniff first. So it's good for their body, definitely, to warm them up first. So make sure you've done 15 minutes minimum on lead first, or just walking pace first if they're off lead and they're trustworthy with that, before you do any throwing. Okay, got comments. So when Obi is on his long lead, 10 metres, all he wants to do is run to the end and pull. His normal loose lead walking is so much better and he hardly pulls now, but not sure how to transfer it onto the long line. So it can be more difficult if he's 10 metres away and he's, off there investigating things or having a play, or, just at the end, because he's not next to you. So what I would suggest you do is actually teach in the same way that you did. So if that was through stopping when there was pulling, then you stop when there's pulling. It might be that you need to have that bit of encouragement to come back to you if that's what you're aiming for, so that if he pulls, he comes back. Like you make a kissy noise, call him back, reinforce him for coming back again. If it's not about him coming back to you and you just want the pulling bit to stop, then just slowing into a stop when he pulls, taking a few steps in a peripheral vision distance in a different direction, so that he's then coming with you rather than just carrying on again. So that means that when the lead goes slightly slack, you then guide off in a different way. So pulling equals no more going forward. You can do following him about as well to an extent, but there will be times where you're also going to need him to follow you. So having clear instructions for him if you need to change direction can be helpful before you need to do it. And like I say, just making sure that if there is any pulling, that it's not getting reinforced with move. Unless the dog actually understands what it means to walk with you, you know, like when they're actually with you, because they understand that it's the slowing of the movement, they don't quite often transfer it when they get elsewhere, because when they're free, the idea is obviously that they're free, so they get more natural pace going, and their natural pace is often quicker than ours, just because of 4 legs and we have 2. So if their natural pace is quicker, they're much more likely to get to the end of that long line faster and be less able to control it. So you have to kind of apply the same rules that you do when they're on lead, and just make sure that you're being very, very consistent with that. And then, like I say, stepping into peripheral vision to go in a different direction can be much more helpful than just carrying on in the same sort of, if they pull, you stop, and then you go forward again, and then they pull again. It can just be easy to just guide off slightly different direction and then carry on. That can help a lot. So like I say, toys I'm a huge fan of. Warm your dog up first. That was tip number 1. You absolutely have to warm the dog up first, because you're going to risk a lot of injury if you don't. I've had that as well firsthand. I've seen that. That's not nice. You need to warm them up. So make sure that there is 15 minutes on lead walking or off lead natural pace walking for the dog prior to you start throwing things around, or tugging, because again, you want their joints to be nice and warm first and their muscles to be nice and warm. Don't play with the toy around other dogs who are not your dogs. So your other dogs may understand arousal, may understand excitement, and may understand the dynamic between you tugging on a toy with your dog or you holding on to a ball and what that might mean. Other dogs, generally, if they come over, it's to interact with your dog. That's usually, or with you. You know, they generally don't tend to come over if they have no interest in either of you. So if a dog has come to you, you don't want, ideally, you don't want to be hanging on to something that your dog wants. You either put it away and say it's all gone, go be a dog, go do social stuff, or give it to the dog and keep walking, so that they've got it in their mouth and they're able to kind of like be in control of that. And then they can mix if they want to, or they can move off if they want to. When dogs are in high arousal state of mind, when they're in anticipation state and they are expecting something that is hugely valuable to them, very, very arousing, very, very exciting, and they're there going, throw it, throw it, throw it, throw it. Or they want you to, you've got Tuggy and they want you to say strike so they can get it. If you're doing that, if you're hanging on to that value and another dog comes over and is like, hi, look at me, and goes to interact with them, the chances of your dog actually redirecting all of that excitement, frustration onto that dog is pretty high. It's not great. So do one or two things. If another dog comes over, or if there happens to be another dog that's nearby in the environment, either give your dog the toy and let them carry it and just be like, it's all gone, go be a dog, go do your thing. Or put it away and be like, it's all gone, go be a dog, go do your thing. So it's one or two things. Don't be in control of it yourself if there's option for your dog getting it. If they believe they're likely to get it again, then that can really, really mess with their social skills. And the other dog won't understand at all, because they will probably just be coming over because they're super, super highly social and want to come and say hi. Which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But if they do, they might not be reading your dog properly. Chances are they might not be. They're not going to be reading your dog, and that your dog is not wanting to play or to interact. So I don't tend to use toys every single day. If I'm going to use toys, I use them as a reward basis for what I want. I don't tend to just go out and just like flinging, throwing. I like to change toys up. So I will, once I've got a value, a retrieve going on, I will transfer the value onto other toys. So it might be to a Kong, to a Frisbee. Like Kongs bounce awesome because they kind of go all over the place. And that they're obviously different sizes. If you've got a dog with a big mouth like Bosun, then like bigger ones are helpful. Changing toys up can also changes the game that you're doing. So Frisbees are more about, they kind of go slower in the air than balls, and they don't land on the floor. So it's more about catching. Well, they do land on the floor if the dog doesn't get there first, but it's more about catching in the air and then landing and coming back, which can be better for joints than skidding if they have been running to get to a ball and then they skid. So I tend to use toys that don't go as far, maybe ones that are heavier, like Kongs. Kongs are heavier, Go Nuts toys are pretty heavy. And I use them as a reward. So, for example, if I get an awesome recall away from something that I think was particularly difficult, I would throw the toy for the dog, let them go get it, or I'd play tug with them and then put it away. Or I will use it for reinforcement of loose lead walking, reinforcement of disengaging from something if it's appropriate to do it. So disengagement is where your dog looks away from something that they were interested in, or that they wanted to keep their eyes on. Now that is very, very dependent on the situation as to if that thing is likely to come over, if the dog needs to be kept calm as opposed to excited, because when you introduce toys you get arousal, which is a good thing. I mean, dogs need arousal in order to survive, but the arousal that they have can actually mean that their choices are not quite great. They can actually get overexcited, overstressed, overanxious, and be more likely to react to something or get excited about seeing something if you're working on excitement. So you have to be aware that the impact that toys have with dogs, whereas food doesn't have that impact, but food is more calming than arousing for most dogs. Not all dogs, most dogs. But food has other fallouts as well. So I won't kind of talk about that at the minute. I'll probably get onto that. But yeah, so I like to have the toys meaning something. So it's a reinforcement, it's a reward. It's not a continuous thing that they have. Because if you have a toy as a continuous thing that a dog has on a walk, what happens is their adrenaline and their cortisol go through the roof. The anticipation and frustration of getting to the place where they get the toy from or getting it from you, if you're already there and they want it, is not healthy for them, really. It's not good, and you will see a decline in their social skills as well, or their want to interact with other living things and to kind of look at the environment properly as dogs should. They tend not to. They can get quite possessive, possession obsessive, which is it's not the same as guarding, but it's a lot of reinforcement through keeping hold of something. And again, for some dogs, we need that. We need them to care about something a lot because it's helpful to us. But for other dogs, it kind of is unhelpful. So as a general rule, I don't tend to just play it endlessly. I tend to actually use it. They have it for a short time and then it goes away. And it might not be every day that they get it, because we do different things. As I said in the last bit, different things and different walks. Toys are just there as a tool, as a like a reinforcer. So, I just also wanted to point out the association for the dogs. You may find, if you're someone who does like to play with toys a lot with your dog likes to play with toys as well, and then you don't have the toy, because the conditioned response in certain environments for the dog has been, when you're outside in this particular environment, you have a high arousal level. So that automatically kicks up because the environment tells them that this is what happens in this particular place. And you've also conditioned them to, if you see something move, chase it. Watch the environment, see it move, chase it. So you may actually see an increase in them noticing things and then wanting to rush at something. That's just because of the association that's been created. So it just needs work on. Doesn't mean you can't kind of never play toys again, or that you have to play toys forever. It just means you need to work at that, because their association of being in an open environment where there's things moving is to chase them. So you need to get wise to kind of what your dog is learning and what associations are being created all the time. You need to know what they are learning and what they're doing. So as a side note, so I said about exercise and how much they should be getting as a minimum. Now, puppies and young dogs, there's very odd advice out there about puppies and young dogs. The standard kind of advice that people tend to follow, and that vets recommend, and a lot of trainers will recommend, is that they need to have 5 minutes of exercise per month of their age. So that's, people take that as they do, they interpret that as they want to. Some people say that's 5 minutes at a time. Some people say it's 5 minutes in total per month of age. the thing is, there's no actual scientific studies that have been done that have proven that to be relevant, to be a fact, to be needed or accurate at all. So there's literally nothing there's been no studies done that have proof of impact when it comes to exercise and joint struggles or growth struggles, or anything, the two having a correlation at all. So it's basically a theory. Well, there's a lot of theories out there in the dog world, which are wrong, which don't exist, which are very dependent on who you ask, because there's actually nothing backing it. There's no scientific study backing that. So I actually think that by a lot of people trying to stick to this rule, where they're trying to preserve their dog's joints and making sure that they're not overdoing it, they actually can run into a lot of troubles. Certainly as the puppy is getting older, and as they go into adolescence, because remember, some breeds hit adolescence very, very young. So they might hit adolescence at 5 months of age, younger in some breeds, and obviously some hit it much, much later. But what happens is, if you're trying to follow a 5 minutes per month of the age rule, then what is actually happening is the social time the dog has is limited. Their greeting skills, because of the amount of things that they can meet, people and dog wise, is limited, unless you flood them, where you go somewhere where it's so busy with absolutely everything and they're overexposed to everything, so they can't actually cope with it or interact with it. So if you're just going on a normal walk where you're likely to see your normal everyday things, chances are in the time you're out, their exposure and their socialising is going to be very, very limited. Your recalls and loose lead walking practice, time and around distractions, again, likely to be limited, because there's not enough distractions to work on around it, so that you're getting the mixture between the free time and the training time. And you get a lot of social frustration. So I think a lot of issues with dogs, behavioural wise and training wise, can actually stem from being having a very, very young pup and trying to do your best by them and trying to not overdo their joints or overdo what they're doing. So they end up not being exposed to as much as they need to be. And then that can lead to a lot of other problems. And meanwhile, quite often, to be honest, having had puppies, I can tell you they're usually running up and down the house, they're jumping up at people and then falling back down again, they're up and down the stairs, and they're just charging around doing zoomies like an absolute lunatic. When, for me, I think that does far more damage than doing an extra 20 or 30 minutes with them, either on lead or doing sniffy walk with them, where they're gently mixing with things at a natural pace, and then they're more likely to sleep when they're at home or be rested at home. I think they're actually more likely to do a lot more damage whilst you're trying to limit the exercise they're having outside, and then inside they're an absolute lunatic. So you have to be sensible. I think there's certainly logic to being sensible. If you certainly if you have a breed who is prone to joint struggles, like your big breeds or your shepherds, your Labradors, you don't want to be doing anything that's likely to make it worse or to cause a problem. But as I said, there's absolutely no scientific studies done that prove that anyway. So just by being sensible, I would say walking them on flat ground, or like gentle terrain as opposed to big hills and things when they're young. Multiple shorter walks could perhaps be much more beneficial than bigger, longer ones where the muscles get tired. And not encouraging rushing around, so like charging after toys or rushing around after other dogs. Just naturally being out and about, wandering around, gentle sort of pace stuff. I think that could be much, much, much more beneficial to young dogs and adolescents as they're growing up than trying to limit the length of time you walk them for. So yeah, it might be worth thinking about that if you have social struggles. Was there anything, time-wise of like walking them when they were young and their exposure to things when they were young that could possibly have impacted? Nothing you can do about it now to change it now, of course, it's happened, but it's worth knowing. So, dogs with existing known issues. I said I wanted to address dogs who have like structure struggles or medical problems perhaps, which is why they can't go out and do what they need to do. They still have an internal requirement need to do it, regardless of the fact of if they can actually do it. So my boy Macson, my lab, he had hip dysplasia, elbow dysplasia, spondylosis, and 2 club feet at the back. So like he had like a foot like that and like one like that at the back. So he was completely wonky. He would run like a crab. He was messed up, bless him. And he was born obviously that way, but I was only aware of it from when he was about a year old. And he was one we followed the 5-minute rule with, by the way. But yeah, he still had that internal requirement, that need to want to do it. Despite the fact his body couldn't do it, his brain didn't know that, and his whole system didn't know that, but his body would get in pain. So obviously he couldn't go and do everything he needed to do. And then you have the additional struggle with things like that, where you can't always keep using treats for things and being able to reward different things and using treats in training, because they put weight on then. And if they're putting a lot of weight on, that's then additional pressure on the joints and on the body. And that is just it's not helpful at all. So it actually will make the problem worse. So my tips for these guys who have structure struggles or, like heart problems, breathing, perhaps, maybe, like they struggle, like Frenchies and pugs and things can particularly struggle and maybe can't do as much outside, certainly in the summer months, because of their breathing ability. So what I actually advise doing is building muscle strength and building rear end awareness. So if you've never heard of that before, rear end awareness is the teaching for your dog so that they're aware they have a back end and that they can move their rear feet independently. Because lots of dogs actually have no idea they have a back end at all. They use their front and the back just follows. But by building muscle strength and body awareness, it can be tiring for the body, but it's really, really good for keeping structure in place, helping preserve those joints and the muscles, and it's good mental workout. So like I say, look up rear end awareness if you have one of these dogs. ACE-free work is something that is incredibly helpful for dogs who need to, again, build muscle strength, rear end awareness, maybe doing things a bit slower. Perhaps they've got a very active brain, but the body's not able to follow. And this ACE-free work can be done with things that are in your house or in your garden. So if you look up ACE-free work to do with Sarah Fisher, it's the placing out of, you can use their food as well, so their food or treats that aren't likely to cause like loads of weight gain. But it's placing out of things at different heights, having things that they step on, walk over, just things from your house and your garden, and placing like treats out of them and then letting them out to do it. So they're slowly going around, sniffing, licking at things. So you might have a licky pad out there with that as well. Obviously, it does depend on what you feed, but you can certainly use food, if their daily food allowance, to your advantage with this. And it's all stuff you can have, so you don't have to pay out any extra to do this, which is hugely beneficial. Slower sniffy walks as well. So for these guys, the slower your sniffy walks, the longer they can kind of be out, they can be exposed to things, they can work on things, and the more mental stimulation they're getting there. If they're rushing around, and they're doing things that are rapid, and there is like arthritis or joint struggles or heart struggles, that's going to limit how long they can be out for and limit what they can do. So you need to assess daily activity. Is the dog running around the house? Are they up and down stairs? Are they zooming everywhere every day? And if so, is that more damaging to them than you doing extra lead walk each day? Maybe building it up from 5 minutes at a time, and just building it up if you've got a dog with those structure struggles. You don't want to just go, right now we're going to do a 20-minute lead walk as well, because that could be a huge jump for them, and that could actually cause them a lot more pain, which could impact behavioural struggles. So yeah, definitely building it up, but slowly. Using daily food allowance for teaching body awareness, or hiding it around the house. So if you raw feed, I don't really kind of suggest that you hide it around your house, but you can hide it around your garden. As I said before, you can put it in kongs and put it in different places in the garden. You can put it on plastic lids, like Tupperware lids, put like a spoonful of their raw, place them all around the garden, and then let the dog out to go and find them, because they have to eat every day anyway. So if you're able to use their body in a way that is going to be more tiring for them, and encourage the sniffing and the slower movements as opposed to like rushing around. That's really, really good for them. If you dry feed, then you have the advantage of being able to put it around your house as well. So you can actually hide it. You can either use a room or you can use the entire house, depending on your dog's abilities and where you want them hunting food from. But yeah, dry food can be used all around the house, so that could be really helpful. So you don't have to use treats all the time, particularly if you have a dog who you're really conscious of putting weight on and you don't want to put weight on them because of structure problems. So I've got so many notes for you guys. Yeah, so pain relief from the vet, it may be a huge factor to what you're for if you're making any changes. So if your dog is already on pain relief, or you feel that whilst you're trying to build up their muscles and their body awareness, and you're maybe slightly increasing their exercise in a very gentle way, speaking with your vet and getting some pain relief there, just so that if they need it, it's there. Or if you could use it as a preventative just whilst the muscles are building. Just because anyone who's had pain, you know what that can be like when you try and do a bit more. Dogs can't tell you. It's really hard for them to tell you that they're achy or they're in pain. So making sure your vet's on board as well. Gradual, slow increase, and keep a record. So I am huge about record keeping when it comes to anything, whether it's changing behaviour, training, changing anything to do with their diet or environment or walks, because you don't know if things are working or if they're helping if you're not keeping records. It's really, really difficult to know what's helping what when you're just looking at it over a couple of weeks. It's like, well, did it help or did it not? You need to keep records of things. So must-haves for dogs with struggles, like your structure struggles or any kind of thing that limits their movement abilities or their exercise, is you need to have rubber mats on slippy floors. Now, I learnt this the hard way. I used to have laminate flooring in the dog room. The dog room was a converted garage that the dogs used to go after walks, so they didn't make the house gross. So if anyone who doesn't know what dog room is, it's not that special. So I had laminate flooring in there because it was easier to clean. What I didn't realise was that the slippiness was actually causing more struggles for Maxson and one of my boxers, because they can't get a grip on it. So when they can't get a grip on it, they're actually tensing all their muscles to try and keep themselves upright. And that's quite painful for dogs, and it can really, really make them feel uncomfortable, make them feel very anxious and on edge because they can't get grip. And even dogs who don't have structure troubles, to be honest, laminate flooring you've got to be careful with. But if your dog does, get rubber mats on slippy floors. Okay, so make sure you've got rubber mats on the walkways where your dog goes to and from gardens, and just where possible in big open spaces as well, so that they're not skidding and not slipping around, because that makes such a huge difference when it comes to building muscles in them and actually being able to increase exercise. You may find the dog can actually do a lot more if they're not slipping and sliding around all the time. Supportive, comfortable beds, so that the joints are all supported. If you have a very large dog, you need to have larger beds that are supportive, that when they lay on them, they don't squish and go completely flat to the floor. Equipment for walking them that does not impact the problem. So again, if you have like breathing difficulties in a dog, having something around their nose is probably not going to help that. If you have heart conditions in the dog, then actually some harnesses can press and can actually restrict the heart, like the heart beats and the heart movement, the heart's function. So I would be very, very aware of what equipment is going on my dog. Are they pulling? Are they walking okay? Can I change anything to make this more comfortable for them and less of an impact for them? Claire, what are your views on dogs wearing dog backpacks and carrying appropriate weights for increasing exercise and teaching body awareness? Interesting you should ask. Bosun used to do this because he was so blooming active and strong, and he used to carry water bottles to begin with, which was helpful for the walks. I think as long as they're introduced, like you would desensitise the dog to wearing a harness, you would desensitise the dog to a head collar, anything they need to wear, you make sure they're completely comfortable wearing it. And first of all, you start it off with no kind of weight in it at all, like you've said, so gradually increasing the exercise, gradually increasing the weight of what they're wearing. I think that's fine. I think it could be beneficial as well. Some dogs really quite like to carry things as well, so St Bernardy types, Alaskan Malamute types, they like to carry things. You'd have to be careful that he wasn't going through any bushes or anything, so it may have to be on a lead walk, so that he's not sort of diving in anywhere and getting caught on anything. I would say the struggle with it is knowing when to stop putting the weight on. Like, at what point is it too heavy and a struggle for the dog? Because dogs are resilient, you know, they will power on even if something is painful, and they kind of, not necessarily painful, but if it's a struggle for them, they will just keep going, and then later on they feel it. So some dogs just have absolutely zero ability to stop. So I would say that's always was my concern with Bosun as well, is it too much? Because that dog would have carried on with a hind leg missing and dragging a steel something behind him, you know. So you need to just do it very, very slowly, very gradually. But I think it could be a good idea, and I think if he's okay with it and he's comfortable with that, I don't see any problem with it at all. But just introduce it slowly and make sure no other dogs are pulling on it. See, some other dogs, when they see a dog wearing something like that, don't realise it's a dog because it doesn't look like a dog's shape. So you may have to watch for other dogs' interactions to Rolly, how that is coming across. Does he look different to them? And like I say, make sure no young pups like Cooper are jumping on him and playing with that and like trying to grab it off him, because I guarantee a lot of young dogs probably would do that. They think it's great fun. I'm just going to check my notes so I didn't miss anything on that before I move on to my timing and associations. No, I think that's it for that. Right. So, associations. So, the reason I put this in with walks is because dogs make a huge amount of associations when they're on walks. Dogs are learning every minute of the day. So, regardless of what they're doing or where they are learning, they're absorbing information, they're taking it in, and they are then learning from it. So, that's positive things, negative things, neutral things. So, for example, if your door goes, the doorbell rings or the door knocks, whatever your dogs do is what association has been created for them with that. Some get really happy. They're like, yay, it's a human. Some start rushing at the door barking. Some will go and hide. You know, it's what that association means for them. Likewise, when you go to the fridge, or you might go to a dog cupboard that you've got, without saying a word, the dog has learned that may mean food, or may mean you're getting food. It could mean dinner time. So dogs learn without you needing to tell them anything. You don't have to say anything. And that is often quite where humans struggle, because we always want to say something all the time. We want to tell them to do something, or ask them to do something, or ask them not to do something. Dogs learn perfectly well with like environmental cues. So things that happen in the environment and what that is paired with, or your movements and what that is paired with, they do not need you to kind of tell them and ask them to do things. That's mainly for the human side. We feel we need it. And so therefore we want to teach them things like that. But dogs are actually perfectly good at learning things themselves. So puppies in particular are like little sponges. So they absorb information like you wouldn't believe. And they learn it all when they're sleeping as well. So the more sleep they get, the more they're absorbing all the information of what's happened in the day. So most puppies will consistently do things and allow you to do things, and for most things to happen regardless of whether they like it or not. So they see subtle signs that they don't like things, but in general puppies are fairly biddable, kind of just do as you do, and that's normal. They do that until one day they don't anymore, and that's usually the onset of adolescence. That's usually when certain hormones have started to come through. And you will start to see, and you will now learn what they actually like and what they don't. So all the things that have happened as they've been growing up in your home or in someone else's home, or in their previous experiences with being young. If you've not been aware of the subtle signs in puppyhood, then you're about to learn very blooming quickly what they find value in and what they don't find value in, and what they like doing, what they don't. And you'll start to see all the accidental pairings that you've been making throughout their learning stage, and when they've been absorbing all this information. All those things that you've accidentally created, you're about to see. And it's really, really easy. I can tell you one of the main ones that I did with Mackerson, my chocolate Labrador. I talk about him a lot because he was a good teacher. He was a pain in the backside, and he was a good teacher, and I was not a good student. So Mackinson, I taught him when he was young and growing up as a pup. He was off lead from quite young, so I didn't have a problem with him being off lead, and he wasn't aggressive or fearful or anything. To be honest, he was just a happy pup, so he was just fine. I actually taught him accidentally that when I call you to stop, look around the environment, see the dog, and then run at it. Because I accidentally only used to call him when there was something there. Because as he was growing into the adolescent bit, he would go further from me, and he would go, oh, I like dogs, I love dogs a lot, you know, oh, there's a dog, I'm going to go and see that dog. And obviously if you see a dog on lead, or if you know, you don't want him running that far, then I would call him and put him on lead. And to begin with, when he was a puppy, I'd call him and he'd go, oh, okay, yeah, I'll come back. And he'd go on lead, and then he'd see a dog, and then he couldn't get to the dog, or, you know, maybe we didn't meet the dog. And all of this was going on. I was completely oblivious to the fact that this was happening. So at this time, I wasn't a dog trainer, I wasn't a dog behaviourist, I was just a dog lover. Knew a lot about dogs, to be fair, more than, you know, just because I'd been obsessed with them my life. But I didn't realise how he was pairing things. So yeah, I learned really, really blooming fast that if I call the dog has learned that that means there's another dog in the environment. So I taught him that his name, when we're outside, meant, look around, there's a dog for you to go and find. So it wasn't, I mean, at the time, I, you know, hated him. But it wasn't his fault. It's just what I taught him to do, because he'd learnt through association that if she calls you, there's probably a dog around, so you might want to check first. And so I had to teach him out of that. And the other one that I taught him accidentally was that your lead goes on at the end of a walk. So again, not only does your lead go on if there's a dog, but your lead goes on at the end of the walk, because then we're going home. So if I would call him at the end of the walk, which was usually similar kind of walks we'd do. So there was one, as I've mentioned before, Waterhall Park, Manor Fields was literally in my street over a bridge. So that was the daily walk we'd do. And then we'd go to different places in the weekends and the afternoons. But the morning walk was that one. So we'd get to a certain position on that walk and I'd call him and he'd go, nope, because you're going to put my lead on and then we're going home. So he wouldn't run off, but he just wouldn't come near me either. And he would stand about 10 foot from me and just look at me. And if I then took a step towards him, he'd move backwards. Or if I tried to move away, he would just keep this distance from me because he knew what was going to happen. And again, it wasn't his fault. It's what I'd taught him. It's what I'd conditioned him to believe. So at this point in the walk, if I call you back, you go on lead, you go home. And he did not want to go home. No. So Maxim was what I call a one-time event learner. And some dogs are like this. Usually working dogs, I'm actually surprised he was a one-time event learner because, to be honest, he was not working minded at all. He was pretty dippy. But one-time event learners are those who something happens once and they go, got ya. Okay, I understand. It's usually common in your working breeds because our whole idea of a working breed is that you teach them it once and then they'll do it again and again and again forever, and you don't have to keep reteaching it, because that is why we have the working dogs, so that they don't need to keep being retaught how to herd the sheep or how to watch the flocks or how to guard the owner. You know, the whole point is that they do it and then they got it. So means, one, that they're easy to teach. So if you've got a one-time event learner dog, they're easy to teach if you get it right initially of what you're trying to teach, but they're buggers for making associations that you don't want them to. They really, really are. And it's so unenjoyable when they've made an association that they believe in their mind is true. And it's probably due to something that that you've done, or something that someone else has done previously to you, or something you were accidentally unaware of. But nonetheless, the association has been made, and therefore in their mind, this is what will happen. So you have to do a lot of reconditioning a different association for them, so that they start to shut off this brain path to that's what it means, and they start to create a different one. So yeah, that's like associations of how dogs learn. So moving on to timing, your timing needs to be spot on for something as well. Now, I don't think a lot of people are fully aware of how important your timing is. Timing is so important. Your dog will pair what you're doing with the environment and changes within that environment at that time. So it is incredibly important that your timing is good. And if you think you've got pretty poor timing, practice working on sharpening it up at times when you're not with the dog. So a great way of doing this is having someone drop a tennis ball and you learning to say yes, or click in a clicker, or click in a pen at the time it hits the floor. So you're learning to watch when it hits the floor and doing that. You can do it watching a clock as well. So when the clock gets to like 12 or 10 or whichever number you like, you click your pen and you start to do it without watching. So you learning timing of things. You can start to do it when you see someone come in the room, you click a pen. So it's starting to make your timing stronger so that you're getting better at noticing things or being aware of things and rewarding at that moment. So the clicking of a pen or the clicking of a clicker would be representing you marking the dog doing something right, and therefore you can reward them for it, or move away from something, or interrupting it. Whatever it is you're trying to do, it's that your timing is getting stronger so that you're transferring the message you're trying to transfer to your dog. I find, generally speaking, people can be very, very chatty when it comes to training dogs, but it's not usually at the wrong point. So there is nothing wrong whatsoever with celebrating with your dog when they do something right that you're trying to teach. And, you can be like, yay, well done, good boy, well done, clappy, clappy, that was awesome, what a good dog, weren't you brilliant? And you can really, really praise it up. So there's nothing wrong with chattiness at that point. I find chattiness at the wrong point is confusing for the dog and unhelpful for things you're trying to pair together. So particularly for dogs who find praise and your voice and you in general is very reinforcing, you can accidentally be reinforcing the wrong thing really, really quickly. So for example, say you were teaching a dog to go on their bed, right? So you want the dog to go on their bed, and you're like rewarding them for being on the bed, and then they go to get off the bed. And instead of just I tend to just say, oops, and then I will redirect them onto a bed. So oops is just my word for, nope, try again. That's, we're not done yet. And then I have all the praise words and the yes, well done, that's awesome when they're doing it right. So there's a lot of emphasis on when they're doing it right. And by right, I just mean what I want them to do. And reinforcing that. But if they do something wrong, and I say wrong like that because, again, wrong is very contextual. It's very dependent on the person doing it and what you perceive as wrong. But if we're going with the example of the bed, so the dog's on the bed and I'm rewarding them for being on the bed and they get off. If I then start going, oh, no, you're not supposed to be off the bed. No, come on, get off, get back on, get on the bed, come on then. That is putting loads and loads and loads of value in them being off the bed. Rather than just going, oops, and then either waiting for a response of them to choose to get back on again and be like, yay, well done, you did it. Or, oops, and then guiding them back on the bed with a treat or a toy, or, if your dog understands and is comfortable with collar guidance, then that can be fine. But if you just keep it short and sweet when the dog isn't doing what you want, and then you're really, really heavy on the praise and the reinforcement at the time they do what you want, your success will be much, much faster. You will get much more progress in. So the best way of doing this is, with anything you're trying to change, is record yourself doing it. Or get someone to, if you're out on a walk, get someone to follow you and record you, if that's doable. I'm a big fan of putting my phone, just leaning it up against things. How it's not been stolen is beyond me, but I will put it up against a bench or a bin or a molehill, anything I can find, a fence post, whilst I'm doing things with dogs in that particular area, so that I can see what I'm doing. I can watch the timing of what the dog is doing, and I can see where was I right, where was I slow, where was I fast, did I help with that dog's association there, or did I actually cause a problem? Did I cause something I'm trying not to see? So even if it's just training stuff that you're working on, you need to check your timing. Are you only interacting with the dog at the point where they pull you on a lead? Are you only interacting with the dog at a point where something appears in the environment? Because you very, very quickly become a predictor of things. And that's so frustrating. So timing example. So I have used this example before in a previous video, but for anyone who's not seen that yet, or just a refresher reminder, it can be really, really helpful to know this following this little bit. Pudge was my English Springer Spaniel. So crazy little lunatic psychopath that he was. He didn't like a number of things, but in this particular example, it was dogs we were working on. So I was working on him no longer getting terrified of other dogs when he saw them, because he would absolutely freak if he saw another dog, and that would either look like weeing, pooing, screaming, trying to attack it, trying to attack me, getting the lead, like anything. Like it was really quite bad when it was bad. And again, this is before I was a behaviourist, so I was a dog trainer, but I wasn't. I didn't have a huge understanding of behaviour and how that worked, and it is very different. And what I was taught was using Pavlov theory, which is pairing something, something fearful with something positive in order to create a better response. A response that I was looking for, a neutral response or a response of relaxing. So what that basically meant was whenever he saw a dog, I was to give him squeezy cheesy until the dog had gone. The specifics of this were the dogs were not able to come to him, so I would go to places such as like car parks or park gates where dogs would be on lead and going to the park or out from the park, but they wouldn't actually be coming towards him and we weren't in the park. So it was kind of safe in a sense. Dogs couldn't come to him, but he could see them. And what I would do is every time he saw a dog, give him squeezy cheesy, and then he started to go off the squeezy cheesy. And he would start shaking violently when he saw it. Now, this is the world's greediest dog, I would like to point out. So if you gave him bits of lettuce, he would eat the lettuce. If you gave him a lemon, he'd eat the lemon. He would scavenge for stuff, and he was obsessed with food, and he would take your arm off the food. So him not wanting squeezy cheesy and him like starting to shake and hide from the squeezy cheesy was obviously not right. Something wrong there. And I spoke to the veterinary behaviourist I was working with at the RVC, and I said, yeah, it's not going so well. He's now shaking when he sees the squeezy cheesy. And what I didn't realise I'd done was I was getting ready with the squeezy cheesy before the dog arrived. And then the dog was there, and then I was feeding him. So what Pudge was doing was he was seeing the squeezy cheesy was predicting a dog appearing, not a dog was predicting the squeezy cheesy. So what that actually became is the squeezy cheese used to terrify him as much as a dog would terrify him, because it meant a dog was coming or a dog was going to appear. And that to a dog who is petrified of another dog is terrifying. So I can even tell you that 4 years or so down the line, at this point of being a behaviourist, I actually wanted to use squeezy cheesy for something. And I wanted to test to see if he still had that kind of association, although by this point he was like pretty awesome with dogs and wasn't bothered by them anymore. I got it out of the fridge, so I bought one, I'd got it out of the fridge, and I offered it to him in the house, and he ran and hid behind a sofa. Even though he was now okay with dogs, even though hadn't used it in like 4 years, that association for him, because of my timing being wrong, and because he was anticipating food at the time when a dog appeared, actually still would cause that terrifying fear of squeezy cheesy 4 years later. It's insane, like the way dogs can pair things and how strong that can be and how important your timing is. So you need to make sure that if you are rewarding anything, or if you're interrupting anything, or if you're punishing anything, that you make damn sure that the dog sees what you're doing first, sees what it is you're working on first, or the behaviour happens first. Do not start anticipating, so having treats or toy ready. Don't have your hand in your pocket, don't have it ready. Be like, it's all gone, got nothing, absolutely nothing for you, until they see what it is you're working on. Or until, just so that you're definitely aware that they've seen what you're trying to work on. Because so often you think you're working on something and you're not. The dog is working on something completely different to you because your timing is slightly off. Okay, so timing, hugely important. So my tips, I've got tips for timing and association when you're working on training or behaviour. So watch, listen and learn. The dog you have today is a very, very different dog to the dog you started with, unless you got the dog yesterday. So pretty much everyone in this group, I would say all of you in this group, the dog you have today is a different dog to the one you started with. So if you want to work on something, whether it be recalls, lead walking, reactive stuff, resource guarding, sepangs, it doesn't matter what it is you want to work on. Observe your dog first. So see where you're at the minute, because you might be at a different place to where you think you are. Your dog may be further forward than you think they are. Your dog may be further behind than you think they are. And you will be working at a point that is different to where your dog needs. So you need to assess kind of where the problem bit starts and therefore where you need to work from. Next thing you need to know is what does the dog find valuable? What does the dog find reinforcing? Now, reinforcement and rewards are not reinforcing or rewards if the dog doesn't find them to be so. For example, if you're trying to use a ball when your dog doesn't care about toys, it's not a reward. If you're trying to praise your dog and fuss your dog when your dog doesn't want to be touched, not a reward. So for example, food is like a common one that people say. So food, you can reward the dog with food. You can, if the dog finds it reinforcing. Now, if your dog, people say my dog's not food motivated. Your dog would be dead if it's not food motivated, okay? They eat, they keep themselves alive. So your dog is food motivated. However, your dog is not as motivated by food as you would like them to be. It could be for a number of reasons. Could be that the value of what you're offering them isn't high enough. Could be that they're stressed in the environment you're offering it in. For example, if they'll take them inside but not outside, that tells you something about the environment. Perhaps your dog is eating a food that aggravates their gut and therefore eating is uncomfortable for them, so they don't actually like to do it unless they have to. Perhaps your dog is fed on a food that's designed to keep them full all day, so they only need a little bit and then they have energy all day long. Therefore, your dog won't be food motivated because they're not hungry. They're full, their stomach's full. So there'll be a reason why your dog is not motivated by food. Doesn't mean you have to use food at all, but you need to know your dog is food motivated. It's just how motivated they are and by what you're using. So if you're going with food, try out different foods, different textures of foods, different smells of foods, dried, cube stuff, wet stuff, dry, mushy stuff, things that stink, things that don't, things that crunch, things that they can just swallow quickly. See what they like the most. Like with toys, is it a ball? Is it a tuggy? Is it a frisbee? Is it a Kong? Is it? Then you need to look at like the way in which they find it valuable. So if you're looking at toys, is it that they like it to be bounced? Is it that they like to be able to catch it midair? Is it that they like to be able to chase something along the floor? Is it that they like to run after it and catch it? Is it the rushing bit after it that they find valuable? Is it the catching of it that they find valuable? Is it the holding that they find valuable? If it's food, again, do they like to sniff at it from the floor? Do they like to be given it from your hand? Now, this is another good, helpful indicator to you, is if your dog doesn't like sniffing food from the ground or taking food from the ground, but they do from your hand when your hand is higher, they may have back end struggles or neck struggles. They're uncomfortable for them. So putting their head down to the floor when they're standing is actually uncomfortable. And therefore it's making a punishment association with the food as opposed to a positive one. So the food, some dogs like to catch it. So you say catch and you chuck it up and they snap it. That's how they like to take it. Some just like to be given it. Some like to lick at it like squeezy cheesy tube. Some like crunchy things. So you need to know what do they find valuable. If it is fuss and praise, because some people will say the dog loves fuss and praise. Great. If you have a dog who loves that, brilliant. There's a way of telling though. Often people go to fuss their dog and their dog will do this. And they'll dip their head out of the way, or they're like, and they say, oh, he loves fuss. I think he does. So what you need to do is to check and see. Those who love fuss, and there are some who will work for fuss and praise, trust me, like they absolutely thrive on it. If that's the case, they're usually ones who, when you start fussing them, their mouth is all open, their tongue is to the side, they're leaning into your body, they might even go into a roll on the floor, or they like back end scrunches, you know, like where the hips and the back end is, and you're doing all of this, and they absolutely love it, and they'll give you their back end to do that. If you're getting that, yes, your dog is probably one of these dogs who absolutely loves fuss and praise and that interaction with you, and you can use that. Again, find out how they like it. Is it behind the ears that they like? Is it the scrunching at the back end? Is it fussing? Long strokes? Do they like the fur to go the other way? Do they only like it one way? Do they like two hands, one hand? When it's praise, do they like you to have a full-on party with them? Like, awesome dog, well done, getting them to jump at you, giving them the fusses, get like kissing in their neck, pushing them off again. Is that something that they like? Or, yeah, Sue's is saying Jackson's is freedom. Freedom is huge. Some dogs absolutely live for freedom. And that is like the running ahead, like that being on their own, just enjoying their own space. Some of them like it to be on cue, so you can put that on cue. I used to walk a few dogs who would say go, 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 and that meant run. And they would come back to you so that you could say go, 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 and then they'd run again. And that was more valuable to them than food or toys or touching ever would have been. That was what they loved. So you say go, 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 and the running is what they wanted to do. So for some dogs, freedom is just super valuable. Bosun used to be quite like that. So I did make him toy, I'm not going to say obsessed, but have a good, what's the word? A strong reinforcement history with toys. I had to teach that him because when I first got him, he didn't understand what a toy was, didn't care about them. Other dogs could play with them around him and he couldn't have cared less once he could be around them, you know. So I actually taught that in him so that I could have him off lead, because freedom was so valuable to Bosun that actually if he was off lead, it was so valuable to him he couldn't have given a damn if I existed. And he definitely would have gone. He would have gone, yeah, completely. So not just gone and come back after a bit, I mean gone. So yeah, his value was in freedom, loved freedom. In fact, if you'd taken him to an enclosed space, he would have gone out of his way to find a hole or to dig a hole or to push his way through a fence or a fence wire or a bush just so that he could have escaped somewhere, because that was the value for him, was escaping and finding a way out. It was bizarre. But yes, dogs find value in different things. I'm just going to read the comments. So Obi had this association with the harness and the car, hates the car and went through a phase of hating the harness. We started introducing the harness again outside of the car to help, but he still gets funny about it every now and again. Yeah, so even though you've kind of changed that association, so it's not to do with going in the car and not to do with travelling in the car, he can still sometimes go, not sure about that, I don't know if I like it, because in his mind that means the car and he's not keen on that, or that association of being there and then what that reminds him of at the time when he had it. So dogs really do strongly pair associations. And it can last even long after you've tried to change the association, or you've moved on and that doesn't happen anymore. As I said with perch, it can really affect them. Claire says there are some people that recommend getting a dog to work for food, so using food as a recall reward for general, etc. If the dog isn't food motivated, would that work or just be stressful as you end up with a hungry dog? So that's kind of like on the NILF program, which is NILF is nothing in life is free, which is basically they work for what they get. I don't know that makes the food any more valuable for the dog. I think the dog is then hungry, as you say. If they see, because what that would depend on is if the value of coming back to you for the food overrides the value of doing what they're going to be doing, or what you're trying to stop them doing, whether it be like playing with other dogs or hunting or investigating other things. So you're still banking on the fact that them coming back to you for food is more reinforcing for them. That then it relies on how reinforcing the other thing is in the environment at that moment, and a lot of other factors. So it can, I mean, certainly if a dog is more hungry and you're offering them food, they're much more likely to come to you for it because they're hungry. Therefore they go, oh, you've got food, great. But if they're in a over-aroused state of mind, quite often dogs will refuse food if they're over-aroused, or if they're overstressed or over-anxious, overexcited. Sometimes they'll refuse food. So that's because they're not in the thinking part of their brain. They're in more of the automatic part of their brain that works instinctively. They're unlikely to then be able to turn around and go, oh, just come back and get some food. So I think definitely if your dog's full up, or if your dog is, they're just not all that on food, slightly lowering their food and using that portion, so lowering the amount of food that they get given freely, and then using a portion of it for them to work for, can certainly help them to want to come towards you for it. But it's very situational dependent. So I wouldn't have said it's not a way that I go about doing things, getting them to work. Some dogs like to work for food. They'd rather work for it than just be given it. And that is genuinely true. Some dogs do. Other dogs, if they're hungry, you're much more likely to see them get stressy around food. Might lead to other things: resource guarding, scavenging for food, tolerance levels being lower. I know I am crabby as hell if I've not eaten. And I can assure you, if someone had chocolate at the time when I was hungry, I would bite their hand off in order to get it. And it wouldn't, asking me to do things in order to get it at the point where I'm hungry is not wise. So I think it could help slightly lowering the food that's free, the amount of food they get that's free, just given, and then using other bits in order for them to work for could definitely be helpful. But just be careful that it's helping. Again, keep data, keep records. Is this helping the behaviour? Are we seeing improvements, or is it staying the same? Is it not helping? Is the behaviour getting worse? Or the training, whatever it is you're trying to work towards. Keep a log of it for whilst you're doing it and see. The tips. So we've got the watch, listen and learn. Make sure you know that the dog you've got today is the dog you're actually trying to train, the one you're working with, rather than the one that you have in your head of the way that they were. Reason I put that in there as well, I should have said this earlier. So we can be very, very emotive when it comes to our dogs. Like, we're emotional about them because we adore them and we have them, and we get these attachments with them. And quite often, any previous associations and trauma, or anything that happened prior to them coming to us that was maybe, not nice, wasn't helpful for them, or if there's anything that's happened in their world before coming to us, or like I said with Pudge, when he had the horrific incident with a dog that caused him to be so dog aggressive, that we can really, really hang on to that as owners, and quite often that gets in the way of us being able to make progress at all. This is quite often why behaviourists who have dogs who have issues will actually work with other behaviourists to help them, because when you've got an emotional attachment, it's incredibly difficult to look at things more objectively and just look at data that you've got and just work on the behaviour that you're seeing, rather than having all the emotion with it. So it helps to know why your dog behaves as they do, for whatever reason. It helps to know. So if ever you've got history, I love history about dogs. I ask a billion questions about dogs because I want to know where this behaviour is coming from, or where this lack of training is coming from, or where this association has come from. And once I know it, I forget it. Because hanging on to a reason why a dog is as they are, oh, it's because of their history, oh, it's because they were attacked, oh, it's because they were frightened when they were younger. All of this is just excuses and things that are getting in your way that are not going to help you in the future. So you have to be quite hard, and you have to, know it, great, brilliant, we've got that information in our heads, put it to the back of your head, and then move forward with the plan that you've got, because the plan remains the same for what you're going to do. The plan is there. This is what you're going to do in order to change the behaviour, because this is how you change behaviour. So in order to change the behaviour, you need to stop hanging on to the way that they were, because they're not like that. They're not in that situation now. That's no longer happening to them now. Now they are with you. They live with you. They've got a nice life. You've got someone who cares because you're listening to this, and you've got someone who is, trying to change their behaviour and trying to work on their associations, or for them just to have a better life. So hanging on for dear life as to what happened to them before is really not going to help you. So, like I say, let go of it. Once you know it, you understand it. We know where it comes from. Brilliant. Let go of it. Then you're going to work on what the dog finds valuable, because you can use that to your advantage. How the dog finds their thing valuable, so the food, the toys, the fuss, the praise, the freedom. What you're trying to change or work on, and you need to build your new associations out of context first, which means you build it when you do not need it. So for example, if you're working on recalls on a walk, you build them at home first. If you're working on associations with the sound of other dogs, you work on it in the garden first, or in the home first, in the car, before you work on it outside. Anything you're trying to build a new association with, you have to do it out of context first, because the best way to remember it is it's like, if you're doing it when you need it and you're trying to teach it at the moment you need it, it's like trying to learn how to swim when you're drowning. Okay? It's blooming hard work, a lot of stress going on. Can't really concentrate that much because you're just trying not to drown. It's the same thing. So you want to introduce it at the best possible point for the dog. So even if, for example, it is your dog finds so much value in other dogs and they absolutely love being around them to a point where they don't care about being around you, then that can only work when you're teaching that when you're with the dog. But you can build value in all your other cue words, in your reinforcers. You can build all of them out of context, and then you introduce it at the best possible point for the dog where they are most likely to get the success. And that is when they've already had the love and the enjoyment with the other dog. They've had the fun, they've gone to the other dog, they've had an amazing, awesome time with it, and then they get to come and have an amazing, awesome time with you. Because that's the easiest point, because they're already done with that dog. Trying to do it before they've seen that dog, really, really hard. Very, very hard if you have a dog who's super socially motivated. So the best possible point for the dog will depend on what you're working on, but you don't do it at the hardest possible point. And don't allow practice of the dog getting it wrong. Now, wrong, again, I'm going to say it like this, because wrong is contextual. What you believe is wrong for a dog to do is probably very different to what I believe is wrong for a dog to do. Very different to what my neighbour believes wrong is for a dog to do. And dogs, who are a completely different species, are supposed to be able to live in our world and understand what each individual person believes as wrong. Okay? So all I mean by that is, do not allow practice of them getting it wrong. Is if you're trying to prevent them from doing something, don't allow practice of them doing that whilst you're trying to build the new thing. So dogs have pathways in their brain, and they go down the easiest one for them. Now, the easiest one for them is the one they've always done. The one they've always gone to, always done, is like the pathway in their brain that is like that grassy field that has that track that has been walked down loads and loads and loads of times. And they're very familiar with that. That is what they go to. When you're trying to build something different, you need to block off this pathway so that's not an option and create another one. And you still have to keep like going over this new pathway in their brain continuously, put loads and loads of value into that one so that that one becomes the one that they default to. Now, occasionally they will go, oh, but that other pathway is open, you know? So you need to block off access to it as much as you possibly can. So that is where your management comes in. When it comes to training and behaviour, there's got to be management alongside it, because dogs will do what works for dogs, and that's the pathway they've always used. So you need to prevent access to that, okay, so that they're not getting it wrong.